One of the fascinating things about telling a story is that what is not included in the story can be as important as what is in the story, whether it's a novel, short story, narrative poem, prose of any kind, or telling a news story or a documentary. The selection of certain details, at the exclusion of others, can define the character of the narrative. For instance, the biopic The Aviator, a film released in 2004, written by John Logan and directed by Martin Scorsese. It's a brilliant piece of selective exposition on the life of Howard Hughes. The film starts off with the single incident that is suggested to be a core event in the character of Howard Hughes, the start of his fear of germs. This is played out as an interaction with his mother while bathing. Regardless of implying an Oedipal complex between Howard Hughes and his mother, it suggests a valid concern about the impact insignificant events can have over the long-term development of a child. What we consider debilitating mental issues in adults, whether it be attention deficit disorder or obsessive-compulsive disorder, they may be the long-term compounded effects of the most insignificant event in a child's early life. This can be almost impossible to know for a fact, as one would need to know the most insignificant detail of what happened in a child's life, the relationship between these events and experiences, and the impact of these experiences over periods of time. One can say that one person in 1,000 can be a serial killer and maniac. Every one of those 1,000 may have similar events and experiences as a serial killer. They themselves don't become a serial killer. It's not to say the potential isn't there, requiring only the necessary behavioral triggers, but that they don't become one in spite of similar life experiences. These could be similar traumas or severe illnesses or injuries. While so many can share these early events, not all of them have the same outcome. As a whole, the film The Aviator is structured in two parts. The first part focuses on the cultural impact of Howard Hughes and the circumstances that brought him to fame. It introduces the character of Howard Hughes, the film director and producer, through his filming of his war film Hell's Angels. It showed the key people he met during the process, the scandals and controversies surrounding Howard Hughes, and the technical issues of filming Hell's Angels. While the first half of the film focuses on Howard Hughes, the movie mogul, the second half hinges on Howard Hughes, the aircraft mogul. A milestone in his career of being Howard Hughes was the crashing of his experimental aircraft and his near death, being a necessary transition between the first and second part of the film. The main focus of this second half of the film is the Spruce Goose and all of the events and controversies surrounding it. The selection of events and actions shown in the film give the image of a bold and enterprising man who used what he was given at the start of his life to the fullest. Details of his life not explicitly told in the story were only hinted at over the course of the film. These were his growing eccentricities and seedy romantic relationships. It also exposed his mental illness, indicated by the collection of jars of urine and the growing compulsive fear of germs. The film did not shy away from these aspects, but did not rely on them to tell the story. The film focused on the rise of the great man and ended at his ultimate triumph, the maiden flight of the Spruce Goose. The Greek philosopher Aristotle explained in his written work, the Poetics, about the nature of a good dramatic work and how it was to be constructed. The focus was primarily on tragic poetry and stage drama, when tragic and epic poetry was the tradition in Greece. The theories are still relevant today, even as the trends of storytelling have evolved from that originating theory. Telling a story is still a process of telling a story. Aristotle's theory on the arrangement of events in a story is explained here, building the plot of the film, what would be the choice of actions and events in the life of Howard Hughes. It creates the narrative of the heroic, yet ultimately tragic, character. Another story may focus on the events following the maiden flight of the Spruce Goose, the tail end of his triumph, on Howard Hughes' drug addiction, illness, and decline. The story told in The Aviator follows a more heroic rather than tragic line. It remains ultimately a tragic story, as a biographical history is already known: the broken needles, the isolation, the long hair and fingernails. Both a tragic and heroic story would be selected from the biographical facts, a story to tell. One story would be the struggle and triumph, the other story would be the decline and corruption of a sick man. Both are selective of the facts, and both would still be true. With all of the institutions and companies that the Howard Hughes empire brought into existence, the heroic story would have more significance, while both stories would still be necessary to tell. It just depends on what the storyteller is focused on, what they're wishing to tell. From the Poetics, in Aristotle's section about plot and its central importance in the story is this: all human happiness, or misery, takes the form of action. The end for which we live is a certain kind of activity, not a quality. Character gives us qualities, but it is in our actions, what we do, that we are happy, or the reverse. In regard to the film The Aviator, the script focused on the first half of Howard Hughes' life, on the actions he took, rather than focused on the afflictions he had no control over, then or in his later years. Being biographical, it was necessary to put these details in the film, but not as a central focus. The central focus was on those actions Howard Hughes took to achieve what he did, and the likewise consequences of those actions. What is explicitly excluded from the film is as important as what the film focused on, but only in factual retellings that aren't working towards a specific narrative. One can conclude this as dishonest or disingenuous, but would have to understand that there is always more to any story than what is told, and that many sources are available for further research on their part, if the subject holds enough interest for them to invest time into. The details of a story, whether fictional or biographical, are decided on whether you are telling a story or telling a history. Even then, in a history, a rudimentary timeline of facts don't provide for context, or define drives or motives of the people involved. This follows the logic of a storyteller. The biographer Ron Chernow is exacting in the historical details of his subjects. For instance, in his biography of George Washington, Mr. Chernow goes into precise detail about the evolution of George Washington's false teeth. In spite of the excruciating detail of Washington's false teeth, as a storyteller, Mr. Chernow makes the story informative, fascinating, and entertaining. Likewise, a philosopher does not make a good storyteller, but a good storyteller makes for a good philosopher. As a philosopher's work is a subject of existence, the relationship between mankind and existence, the storyteller tells the story of that relationship between mankind and existence, providing a context for that relationship in the guise of the larger story that the philosopher cannot provide. In Aristotle's Poetics, a good story is the plot, which is a character in decisive action. What kind of action? To what end? A good end? A bad end? These are the questions a story is to tell. Modern action films are a good example of this. While not full of ethereal and esoteric philosophical or emotional exposition, the modern action movie has the framework of good storytelling. There is the plot, which is played out by a decisive character making logical choices towards a goal, dealing with ordeals along the way which challenge whether the character has complete control of all of these events, to what extent they have control of these events, and to what degree of success they have in their end goal.